There are moments in life that burn themselves into your memory so completely, you can recall them down to the exact minute. For Gayle King, that moment came on June 24, 1990, at 9:16 in the evening. And what she found when she walked through her bedroom door that night would reshape the entire trajectory of her life. But to understand what that moment meant, you have to go back 8 years earlier, to the woman she was before it happened. It was 1982. Gayle was 28, grinding her way up through local television at a time when black women in broadcasting had to fight for every second of airtime. She wasn't famous. She wasn't wealthy. She was sharp, warm, and relentlessly hardworking, the kind of person who made everyone around her feel seen. William Bumpus was a lawyer, polished, articulate, and ambitious. When they met, Gayle saw someone who could match her energy, someone she could build a life with. So they got married, and for a while, it felt exactly right. They had 2 children, a daughter, Kirby, and a son. William Jr. Gayle was doing what she always did, holding everything together. Up before dawn for the morning news, home in time for dinner, present for school events, keeping the household running. She wasn't just a wife and mother. She was the engine of that family. And the man she'd chosen to share that life with was about to prove he never truly appreciated what he had. From the outside, the mid-1980s looked good for them. Gayle's career was gaining real momentum. Producers were taking notice. William's law practice was steady. And threading through all of it was a friendship that had quietly become one of the most important relationships in Gayle's life. She and Oprah Winfrey had met back in 1976 at a Baltimore TV station. By the time Gayle married William, that bond was already unshakable. Oprah saw in Gayle what most people missed, not just the talent, but the loyalty, the steadiness, the rare quality of someone who shows up when things get hard. And that is precisely what Gayle was doing, year after year, in her marriage. By 1989, they had been together for nearly a decade. 2 healthy kids, a career on the rise, a home that functioned. Anyone watching from the outside would have said she had it figured out. But something had shifted, and Gayle, being the kind of woman she is, likely sensed it before anyone else did. She has never spoken publicly about the arguments, the distance, or the late nights when things felt off. She's always been careful with her words. But here's what you can piece together. By that point, her career demanded early mornings and late evenings. Long stretches away from home. And those stretches, it turns out, had become opportunities for someone who was looking for them. What happened next wasn't a slow unraveling. There was no trail of suspicious texts, no hotel receipt, no whispered phone call she had to decode. It was immediate. It was brutal. And it happened in the one place she should have felt completely safe. On June 24, 1990, at 9:16 in the evening, Gayle King walked into her own bedroom and found her husband in bed with another woman.
No rumors.
No warning. Just the door swinging open and the truth staring back at her. Her children were down the hall. She had been at work all day, doing what she always did, building a career, showing up for her audience, being the responsible one. And she came home to that. The woman in that bed was never publicly named. Gayle never said who she was. And honestly, that detail matters less than you might think. Because what William Bumpus did wasn't just bring another woman into the marriage. He brought her into their home. Into their bedroom. Into the bed he shared with his wife. And according to people close to the situation, this wasn't a single moment of weakness. The affair had been going on for some time. The only thing that changed on June 24th was that Gayle finally saw it with her own eyes. She has told this story in interviews over the years. And every single time, 2 details stay exactly the same, the date and the time. June 24th, 1990, 9:16 p.m. She remembers it to the minute. That's not casual recall. That's a moment that got seared into a person's memory because it was the exact second everything collapsed. But here's the detail that reveals everything about how Gayle processed this. When asked in a Vanity Fair interview who she despised most, she said she couldn't quite recall the name of the woman she caught naked with her husband. The date? Remembered perfectly. The time? Locked in. The other woman's name? Gone. She was telling the world something without saying it directly. That woman was so irrelevant to her story, so peripheral to the real wound, that she couldn't even be bothered to hold onto her name. The betrayal wasn't about a stranger in her bed. It was about the man who put her there. After that night, Gayle did something that will feel familiar to anyone who has ever been blindsided this way. She tried to save the marriage. She went to counseling. She sat across from the man who had humiliated her in the most intimate way possible, and she tried to find a path forward, not for herself, but for her children, for the family she had spent years building. And William sat in those sessions too, saying the things people say when they've been caught and they're afraid of losing everything. But here's the truth about trust: once it shatters that completely, in that specific way, in that specific room, it doesn't come back. You can try to piece it together. You can pretend the cracks aren't there. But every time you walk through that door, you see it again. The counseling didn't work. It couldn't work. Because the problem wasn't poor communication or growing apart. The problem was that William Bumpus had taken the most intimate space in Gayle's life and made it the place where he destroyed her. For 3 years after that night, Gayle carried the full weight of it. From 1990 to 1993, she raised 2 children, maintained a growing television career, showed up on camera every morning with a steady smile, while going home to a marriage that was already a ghost of itself. 3 years. Picture what that costs a person. Waking up next to a truth you can't undo, going to work, performing composure for an audience that has no idea what's happening behind the scenes, and then coming home and doing it all over again. And during those 3 years, she was the only one in that marriage actually trying. In 1993, Gayle filed for divorce. 11 years, 2 children, and a life she had poured herself into, over. And unlike the high-profile divorces that dominate headlines today, this wasn't a battle over mansions and fortunes. Gayle wasn't a household name yet. She was a local broadcaster in her late 30s, starting over with 2 kids and a career that was still finding its footing. She took custody of both children. She kept working. She kept building. Without a safety net, without a lavish settlement, without anything to fall back on except her own ability and her own will. Every milestone that came after, every step toward the CBS anchor desk, every high-profile interview, every recognition, she earned entirely on her own terms. William Bumpus wasn't part of any of it. And then, 26 years later, just when his name had all but faded from the story, something unexpected happened. In 2016, William Bumpus broke his silence. He released a public statement saying he had been haunted by his life-altering choice, that he was publicly apologizing for the major transgression that had dramatically changed all of their lives. Haunted. Life-altering. Major transgression. Those are not the words of a man who found peace. Those are the words of a man who spent 26 years watching his ex-wife become everything he never helped her become, and knowing exactly why he was watching from the outside. Gayle, for her part, had long since moved forward. By 2006, she said plainly that she was healed, that she wasn't bitter, that she had done the work and come out the other side. Not as the woman who got cheated on, but as herself, the journalist, the broadcaster, the woman Oprah Winfrey has called her best friend for decades. The woman who sat across from world leaders and never once flinched. And by 2024, at 70 years old, she was still saying she believed in love. Still saying she was open to finding it. Not out of desperation, out of conviction. After everything she endured, she still believed she deserved something real. And honestly, that might be the most remarkable thing about her entire story. She never let one man's betrayal, at one specific moment on one specific night, become the story of her life. She walked out of that bedroom, she survived the 3 years that followed, she made the hard choice when she finally had to, and she built something extraordinary out of the wreckage. She never publicly tore William Bumpus apart. She never needed to. His own words eventually did it for her. There is something quietly powerful about a woman who refuses to let the worst night of her life define every night that follows. Gayle King knows exactly what that costs. And she paid it every single day, until she didn't have to anymore.